fourth I am statement from the Gospel of John. I've been loving this devotional series because we really get to hear a variety of ways Jesus pursues us. Jesus invites us into a relationship with him. And so I encourage you, if you haven't listened to the first three, to go back and take a moment to listen to them. But today we're still in chapter 10 of the Gospel of John, and we're still talking to the Pharisees. Jesus is, if you remember, he had healed a blind man. The blind man had went around to town and he began to tell everyone about Jesus and what he'd been doing and how he'd been healing people. And the Pharisees heard about this, and so they called the man in, and as they talked with the man, they wanted him to deny what Jesus had done. They wanted him to give the credit to somewhere else, and when he refused, they kicked him out. They kicked him out of the tabernacle, out of the relationship that they thought they were giving this man to God. And so Jesus sits down to talk with the Pharisees, and he begins to tell them about shepherds and sheep and pasture and what that looks like, about what a leader should be. And he declares himself to be the door. He says, I am the door, and anyone that comes through me can enter into a relationship with God. A big, bold statement, unlike anything that the Pharisees had ever seen. See, they expected that we would live by all of these rules and laws, that would make the right sacrifices. That was what was ideal for the Jews. And when they didn't do that, when they didn't follow the laws to the letter, when they didn't make the proper sacrifices, they felt like their relationship with God was completely useless. But what Jesus came to do, not only did he come to give his life, but he came to show what the law truly was for, to point us to a relationship with God, to prepare us for the perfect sacrifice. And so he declares, hey, this is what a shepherd looks like. These are the things that you should find in a shepherd. And these are the reactions of what a sheep has to a shepherd. And when he does that, he says, I am the door. Anyone that comes to me, anyone that denies themselves, gives up their life and comes follows me, they can enter into the presence of God. Not all of these rules and things you've laid out. See, remember, he's talking to Israel's leaders. There's what is meant to be their spiritual leaders, and he's telling them, hey, you've got it all wrong. It's not about the rules, the laws, all that regulations. It's about a relationship with me, with Jesus. And so he says, if you come to me, you can have life. And so in the midst of that, he's like, okay, here's what that looks like. And he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So now he switches over to him being the good shepherd. And so what does that mean for us? What was a shepherd like in Jesus' day? You have to remember this was designed to be an example of something, an illustration that anyone that was listening to him could understand. See, they knew shepherds. And in Jesus' time, shepherds were often the low of the low. They weren't considered bad people. They were just considered outsiders. They did their thing and they were kind of out on the outskirts of society. Often thought of as dirty and got little respect. But if you remember, God always pursues and uses those the world find useless or ordinary. And so when Jesus was born, the first to hear about it were the shepherds. Jesus is calling himself the shepherd to give us this picture of, okay, this is what shepherds were doing. They would understand that. If you remember, the first king that God gave Israel, not the first king Israel had, but the first king that God gave to Israel was a shepherd, a humble servant out tending to sheep. And so what did shepherds do? I mean, Jesus gives us a little picture at the beginning of chapter 10. He says he guides the sheep. A good leader leads the sheep from the front. He goes out before them and he takes them to where they need to be. He stands not behind them, telling them where to go, not just in the midst of them. He's out front, taking the brunt of whatever life throws at him. The sheep know the shepherd's voice. They can discern it from any other voice around them. Now, if you remember, we're going to draw this picture of shepherds out a little more. If you remember Psalm 23, remember our lowly shepherd boy made king, David, wrote Psalm 23, and it's about what it looks like for God to shepherd his life, to lead him and to guide him and to lay him down in good pastures. And one of the things that David says is he is comforted by his rod and his staff. Things that shepherd used to guide the sheep. They would sometimes hook the sheep's necks to pull them out of danger. They would carry around a rod to protect the sheep. Maybe sometimes to nudge them in the right direction, or sometimes to defend them from something endangering their lives. The shepherd would protect and comfort and guide the sheep. They were humble people that wanted to just serve. They were simple in what they desired to do, but they were oh so important to the sheep. They protected the sheep and guided the sheep and spoke to the sheep and tended to the sheep. It's just like we have farmers today who love their animals and will do everything to care for their animals and care for their crops and produce things. Just like we choose to protect those around us, our friends, our family, our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors. We go out of our way to defend them and care for them. And Jesus is saying, hey, I'm the good shepherd. And what the good shepherd does is he lays down his life. And so he's drawing this beautiful picture. He's saying, listen, hey, here's what shepherds are. And so you have this moment, people, to listen to me, Jesus, and hear that if you want to enter into God's house, if you want to come into God's pasture, if you want to have a relationship with God, it isn't those rules. It isn't those regulations. Remember, Jesus came to show them the truth of what God was telling them. Yes, Jesus fulfilled the law, but the law just showed people how they couldn't get to God on their own. And so Jesus is coming and he's saying, hey, look, it's not about those things. It's not about living a perfect life. It's not about having everything under control. It's not about making the right sacrifices. It's about having a relationship with him. So Jesus said, hey, have a relationship with me, and then you enter into a relationship with God. And so he says, hey, look, I am the good shepherd. As you enter into a relationship with God, I'm going to continue to protect you. I'm going to lay down my life before you so that you can know the peace and the comfort that comes with living in God's pasture. I'm going to go out before you, and I'm going to speak truth into your life. See, we have that. We have an opportunity to have a relationship with God through Jesus. We have an opportunity to know truth right here and now. We have God's literal word to us. Jesus was God's literal word, stepped down into heaven to teach us the truth of what he wanted for our lives. That he, Jesus, is the only way to get into the presence of God. And so he invites us in through the door and he says, look, when you come in, I'm not going to abandon you. Life is going to be hard. I mean, do you remember David, Psalm 23? As I walk through the dark valleys. I mean, think about your own life. Think about some of the hardships you have. And even if you've been pursuing Christ for a long time, and you're like, yeah, I've seen these dark valleys in my life. See, it doesn't say that God's going to put this giant bubble around us and protect us from all the bad things in the world. He's saying, no, when you're in the midst of those, Jesus will be there leading you. Jesus will be laying down his life for you. Jesus will be inviting other sheep into this fold. Remember, he's talking to the Jews. And he's preparing them for, hey, the Gentiles are coming into my family. And he's telling them, listen, I'm going to lay my life down for you. I'm going to walk before you and guide you and comfort you and protect you. You just got to trust me. And then it ends with this promise of no one takes my sheep from me. And so we have this picture of Jesus declaring to us in this incredible way and says, listen, if you want a relationship with God, it's not what these Pharisees have been telling you. They're missing it. They're truly missing it. And it's the same thing with all the things in the world right now. If you want a life worthy of anything, we were created to pursue our Creator. And God gave us a way, even here today, that 2,000 plus years ago when Jesus died on the cross, He invited us through the gate. Now. And He says, hey, I'm going to this cross to bear your burdens. I'm going to lay my life down for you. And I will take your sins that won't happen for thousands of years, and I will bear them on that cross. And I will invite you into a relationship with God, a relationship that you will have with no other thing on this earth. And I will lead you, and I will guide you, and I will teach you, and I will walk with you, and I will comfort you, and I will protect you. And in the midst of hardness on this world, I will be present. And so we have to remember that. We have to live in that promise. We have to do our lives based on the fact that our goal is to enjoy what the shepherd has for us. And so, Father, I pray that you would help us understand that. That when we hear the voice of the shepherd, when we read Scripture, we are invited into a deep relationship with you, God. And we have to walk in that truth. We have to be like sheep who are frankly ignorant animals. And we have to just, without question at times, just say, okay, God, whatever you say, I'm going to go do. Whatever you're asking me, I will pursue. So, Father, help us have that